Hello and welcome back to the Toffee Blues YouTube channel, your source for all things Everton. My name is Thomas, back on the channel today with another extra time video. This time, another Merseyside Derby loss at Anfield. It's put us into the relegation zone. They are flying high at the top of the table. It's not a great time to be an Everton fan, but we're going to slightly dissect the game. We'll, of course, talk about the controversial VAR moments. We'll talk about the referee, and we'll also look ahead to the rest of the season and see how we do find our way out of this mess. And I say we because today I am joined by Mike from the Unholy Trinity Podcast. Mike, thanks for coming on. How are you feeling after the weekend?
It's difficult, isn't it? Obviously, we saw Burnley win before we played, which wasn't particularly helpful. So we knew we were going into the game in the bottom three, and it was always going to be a difficult task at Anfield to get something from the game. And all in all, they performed probably the way the manager wanted them to. To be honest, I think tactically, probably got it spot on. Probably one of his better tactical games from Lampard. And on another day, we might have scored one or two, like you said. A couple of 2 or 3 key decisions that went against us, which we've seen too often this season. As a club, how many games could we reel off now where we've had decisions not go our way? I'm not talking about borderline things. We're talking about blatant incidents here where the referee with VAR are getting things wrong. And, as I say, it's a difficult game before we even start. And then when you've got the officials against you, it makes it twice as hard.
Yeah, it has been very bizarre to see this season. Of course, naturally, the City one springs to mind, but we know there's been plenty of decisions. But we won't start there. We'll start off with the lineup you mentioned there. Lampard's tactical decisions, I think, have got better since he's joined. Maybe when he joined, we were slightly naive, trying to play this very attacking style. Over the past couple of matches, that's definitely changed into more of a scrap. We've been much more compact, is a word I use kind of in inverted commas, because I'm not sure you can argue that we are too compact, but we have seen improvement. So what did you think of the general setup? You mentioned there that you were slightly more impressed with Lampard.
I just think he got it right. Everyone seems to knew what they were doing. Obviously, we weren't going to have much of the ball. That was just how it was going to be. We had to make it difficult for them. And, generally, we looked like we were disciplined in our approach. When quite often you'd see a Wobie break from the midfield three to go and close down centre-halves, but then he knew when to get back. So, obviously, Richarlison quite often was up there on his own in a defensive setup. But I just thought, all in all, from a discipline perspective, I think we got absolutely spot on. Now bear in mind, we went in there without, you'd say, a defensive midfielder. As much as Alan played there, I still think he plays better a little bit further forward. And obviously, a Fabian Delph type is probably more suited to that particular role. So I think him, Decore, who struggled in recent weeks especially, did okay. And I just think it was the play seems to be switched on. And when we had our moments where we could counter, we tried to make the most of them. We look at the first half when Gordon is coasting past Alexander-Arnold, clearly gets shoved. Nothing is given. There's one example. We've had the chance obviously with Decore when he gets played through. It was Shawawobi, wasn't it? Plays the ball through to him and maybe he should have done better. Drags the shot wide. Gordon in the second half, from the penalty incidents to the one where he sent the ball wide. So to be fair, we had some decent moments in the game from an attacking perspective, as much as we had, 17-18% of the ball. So that's how sides for me should be going to Anfield sides we're inferior. Of course we are. If you are inferior and you want to make a game of it, you've got to go there and be conservative and be disciplined. And the man just got it absolutely spot on.
Yeah, I'd agree. And some of the words I never thought I'd be finding myself saying was I was disappointed that Delph was on the bench, to be honest, when the lineups came out. Delph's done a fantastic job since he came back of shielding that defence, as you mentioned. And although Alan can do that, we've seen at times he likes to charge out a bit more, which doesn't give you that protection for the back four that you definitely need against a side like Liverpool. Not that he had a bad game by any means, but he's not. I wouldn't say he's particularly suited to that role as much as Delph has shown himself to be. But in terms of the compact nature that we have, we were more conservative, and that's absolutely fine by me, because when Lampard first joined, we were trying to play this great football. We did it once against Brentford, and it hasn't really been replicated at all. And there were concerns when the manager came in, obviously, of his defensive record. Can he set up a side to be compact away from home, to kind of grind out results? I'd agree with you. It was a pretty impressive performance defensively, and going forwards, we obviously had those moments where it looked like we could score. There's been much made about the record possession that they had. Whatever, possession's a fairly irrelevant stat if you're still making decent chances, and we were. We probably would have had a couple of more decent chances if Gordon wasn't being ignored by the referee. And I don't want to lament on for that for too long, because it's a very tricky thing to kind of say after the fact. We can sit and complain about the decisions, and it has been poor. Seems like the club have made some sort of complaint. Seems like the FA also want Lampard to explain his comments. So we know this always goes down. Like, we might end up getting an apology. Lampard might probably get fined. It's a useless way to go. It doesn't improve the system at all. And it was a very, very curious officiating performance, and especially in the kind of, I won't call it a brawl, but the pile-on by players. Sadio Mane's, he's put his hand into two different players' faces. Any other time in the Premier League, you'll see that given as a red card, and you only escape with a yellow with that. And if VAR takes one look at that, I can't see why that doesn't come out as a red card. It's a very baffling decision. And as I mentioned, it seems like the club are on it, but we know that these channels that they do go through tend to be fairly pointless, and we don't get much of a result out of that. But it didn't surprise me entirely. Look, we know that decisions have gone against us in the past, well, especially the past few months, definitely. And it's not helped where we are, but we also haven't helped ourselves where we are. And this was an improved performance against a very, very good side that I didn't expect us to get much from. And it looks much worse now. Burnley have picked up a couple of wins. Like, if we looked at the fixture list a couple of weeks ago, we weren't looking at Liverpool and Chelsea games, matches that we're going to win towards the end of the season. So we kind of have to take it as it is. We are now technically in the relegation zone, but we do have fixtures coming up that we can win. And I'm going to kind of quickly go through them here, because after this, we could talk about the match for patches. But as much as we think it's a better performance defensively, we had moments going forwards. That's kind of out the window now. We kind of written off that match anyway. That wasn't where we expected to pick up points. But coming up, I'll just rattle them off now. Home to Chelsea, away to Leicester, away to Watford, home to Brentford, home to Crystal Palace, and away to Arsenal. We find ourselves 2 points behind Burnley now in the relegation zone, with, of course, that game in hand, which I believe is technically against Leicester, but that might be rendered irrelevant if we end up going ahead to lose to Chelsea. But coming up on Sunday, it is Chelsea next. As much as we wouldn't expect to get a result there, look, they're kind of coming towards the end of their season. It seems like, I think there was a quote in The Athletic that they're kind of winding down. They kind of want the season to be over, especially with all the controversy behind their owner. So where are you looking at that fixture list, Mike, and say we're going to be picking up points, especially in the next few games anyway, where we're going to need to pick up a bit of momentum before the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. The next three games are very difficult. Chelsea on the day can beat anyone. They're a top side. They should have really gone through in the Champions League against Real Madrid. And almost threw it away. And then you a few issues behind the scenes with, obviously, Rudiger hasn't signed a new contract and he's going to be on his way to Real Madrid. They've got issues defensively with injuries to centre halves. So yeah, they're not firing on all cylinders, but they've got quality throughout the squad. They can beat anyone, as I say, on any given day. And I go into that game, I think, with a lot more hope than I went. Well, certainly a lot more hope than I went to the Merseyside Derby. We've shown it this season. We can beat sides, I'd say, sort of on par with Chelsea, probably just below, like Man United, the likes of Arsenal. We've beaten those kinds of sides. We performed well, I thought, against Man City, especially for the first 45 minutes of Goodison. So I've got a bit of hope that we can get something from the game. Again, Burnley play Watford Saturday, so we'll know what the situation is there. If Watford can get a win, which I think is the best result for us, and we know that if we beat Chelsea, we go above Burnley again with that game in hand. We're in the week. It really gives you some momentum. And if you take something from the Leicester game, or you win against Leicester, you get yourself a little bit of breathing space again. So things can change quickly. They've changed quickly over the last few weeks for ourselves in a negative way. We've got to go in there against Chelsea. And like you say, they're probably looking to wind the season down, looking to the FA Cup final against Liverpool. But from a league perspective, they'll probably get top four anyway. So there's little pressure there. Like you say, the off-the-field issues that they've got with Abramovich and the sale of the club, and the fact that they can't sell tickets and things like that. So there's a lot going on there. I'm sure that impacts the playing staff, the coaching staff as well. So it's up to us to take that chance. And we're playing a side who performs a little bit up and down, and they're lucky against West Ham. I thought West Ham rested a few players, and I thought performed pretty well at Stamford Bridge, to be honest. So no fear. That's the important thing. We've got to go there and be confident on Sunday. That's one of the games I'm looking at to get something from. I've got to be honest. I mean, the likes of Watford away, really tough game. If they beat Burnley, they're back in the mix, aren't they, to get themselves out of trouble. So it depends again how that game goes. But Watford away, again, it's probably a dare not lose. Leicester, if we can pick up 5 points from the next 3 games, you're sitting all right. If we're picking up sort of 3 points or less, we're in trouble for me. But it all depends how. I mean, Leeds have got Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea next 3 games, really difficult. They could go either way. They could feasibly lose 3 games. We could win a couple out of our next sort of 3 or 4. Well, out of our next 4, and we can go above them. So it can change quickly. But that it's hard at the moment not to look past the one game at a time. It's got to be one game at a time. It's okay. If you get relegated, it's an absolute nightmare. Let's be honest. And I've been saying for a long time, leave the post-mortem until the end of the season. If we stay up, if we go down, changes have got to happen. There's a lot of questions to be asked and answered by the club. But we've just got to look one game at a time as a fan base, as hard as it is. As much as, I'd hate to see Everton in the Championship, all we can do is give our all as a fan base and just concentrate on supporting the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And we'll mention a couple of the fan ideas for the Sunday match in just a moment, but I wanted not to kind of get away from the derby too quickly there. As we both said, there are signs of improvement, a bit more defensive nous anyway. Taking that forward, that's going to be essential because, part of our problems have been our shoddy defensive record. It seems Yerry Mina came back into that, made it all right for about a game. Seems like he got rested in the derby, which is an interesting concept. But if the manager looks at that and thinks it's not a game we might win, maybe want to keep it fresh for the rest of the season, I don't think that's a terrible idea. We, of course, saw Godfrey go off injured in the warm-up. So the fact that we did have that central defensive partnership of Michael Keane and Mason Holgate, I don't think anyone was sitting comfortably for an hour before the match, or at least when Godfrey got injured anyway. But a couple of stand-up performers, Mikalenko's really could kind of come into his own. Iwobi's been much better centrally than he definitely was out on the wing. And if Delph can stay fit and Mina can stay fit, I'd say that's already kind of a positive defensively going forwards anyway. So just looking at the derby in isolation, what would you take from that match just going forward?
I think they've got to look at what they did well, and what we did well was the defensive setup. So now can nullify a top class team, probably one of the best sides in the world, if we're being perfectly honest. As much as we dislike them and what have you, they're a very, very good side, and probably them and Man City are the top 2 sides in Europe. So it's we nullified them. Unlucky to concede the goal. A lot of things went against us. So we've got to really take from it the fact that how good we were for that first hour. Even after that, we still had a couple of chances to get back in the game and draw level. And we've got to look at that and bear in mind, like you say, that was a game where we were still missing players. I mean, Yerry Mina wasn't in the squad at all. Frank Lampard said that he reacted after the Leicester game, and he obviously probably found it difficult to play the full 90 minutes. Has been out for quite a while, so you wouldn't throw him in a Merseyside derby, which is going to be a high intensity game with a lot of defending to do. So I get that. Delph apparently reacted as well, so no issue there with taking him out. It's always a gamble because your most important game is the next game. So the derby was important. We could have taken something from it, but we could have taken something from it with that side on the day, and maybe should have done. We could argue, but a lot of positives to take, I think. And I think that what the players need to take more than anything is they've got to now look at this. It's sort of against the world attitude, to be honest, because the agenda that we've seen sort of post-derby, during the derby, from certain people within the media, I think that the club and the players need to look at that. That should galvanise them. We're being told every single day we're going to go down. We've got certain players who are being called out as potentially being cheats and this, that, and the other. So that should galvanise the players for me. But everything that gets said about them put it on the wall in Finch Farm. Let's read it on a daily basis. Let's get together and show them on the pitch, because at the end of the day, it's still in our hands. We've still got a game in hand. We can still get out of it. There's still a lot of hope there. And the only ones you can get out of it are the manager and the players on the day. And as I say, they need to look at what's being said about them in terms of after that Derby game and use that as a positive, to be honest.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It does see, I mean, if anyone was watching Sky Sports, we're not going to go on about the commentary, but it was atrocious. We all know that. It's just, I mean, it's not surprising, but it seemed especially bad for some reason at the weekend. The media do seem to want us to go down. It is their big story at the end of the day. No disrespect to Burnley or Watford or Norwich. I think if Everton get relegated, it's a much bigger story at the end of the day. So it's of course something that they're going to want to talk about a lot. And I hope that does fuel the players. I hope it doesn't work negatively. So we'll have to see how that works. But as you mentioned, it is still technically in our hands, as much as it doesn't look like it at the moment. We do have that game in hand against Leicester, and that would take us back out of it if results go our way as well. This weekend's going to be massive, but then again, every weekend is going to be massive from now until the end of the season. One team's going to edge out of it, and something that might provide a bit of an edge anyway is the idea that fans welcome the players on Sunday. It's not something we've done before. Of course, it has been associated with a particular other club, but at the end of the day, they're not the first club to do it, which is probably some of the backlash that it's seen. But I was interested in your opinions on that idea.
It's something which, you do whatever you can to help the side. I remember the FA Cup game, so Frank Lampard's first game against Brentford at Goodison, and it wasn't obviously fans, it wasn't flares and flags and all that, but I was outside the church there at the corner of Gladys Street, and there was a lot of people milling around when the coaches are guys, and there's a lot of noise. There's a big roar, and obviously if you're a new manager, but you saw how just having hundreds of people there helped the players, I suppose, club in this city. I think obviously the thing is, Everton fans have criticised it all the time. When Liverpool have done it, Everton fans have been the first to jump on it and sort of slag them off. I've noticed, which is it's a little bit of banter, local rivalry, this, that, and the other. But listen, I don't care if it's going to help the players. Get down there, get your flares, get your flags. Make some noise, make them feel special. Make them feel that they are loved. And whatever we can do to help that side it needs to be done. As I say, anyone who does any players, have you got issues with players, save us till the season's over, and we'll do our post-mortem then, hopefully when we're still in the Premier League.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's the most important thing is, look, we know the season hasn't gone well. We know the players haven't turned up at times, but it doesn't help to sit around and continue to criticise them now. It's going to take a lot of fan effort. It's going to take a lot of player effort to get us out of this, but we still have to play our part, purely because we can complain as much as we want at the end. We can have an internal investigation. You can do whatever you like, but right now we need results on the pitch. If it helps, it helps. If that works, then fantastic. I don't really care who it's associated with, or if you don't oppose it. If you do oppose it, that's fine. Do what you like. Do what you normally do on a match day. But anything that's going to work to potentially help us get out of this is going to be important. And then and as you mentioned, we'll reassess at the end of the year whether we go up or down. There will be questions asked, but now's not the time. Now is the time to get behind the players, because it is going to be a tricky couple of weeks. But that pretty much brings me to the end of my thoughts on the match. Mike, I don't know if you've got anything you'd like to add before the end.
No, like you say, we're not going to dwell now on what happened from an official's point of view. The club have made their feelings known. It's probably a waste of time. We've got to forget the game now, move on. But like I say, use it to galvanise us as a club, as players, as a fan base. As you say, there's the stories. The media want Everton to go down because it's the biggest story. So we've got to use that as a positive for us. Stick together. 6 games to go in our hands. Let's be as positive as we can, one game at a time. And it starts on Sunday with hopefully a win against Chelsea at Goodison Park.
Absolutely. I agree with everything you said there. So thank you very much for watching. Let us know your thoughts down below as well. Mike, thank you very much for coming on again. If our viewers don't know who you are by now, where can they find you again?
So on Twitter at UHC Podcast, and obviously across all the usual platforms like Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Podbean, all of those we're on there. Sports Social Fan Hub as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. as I mentioned, thank you very much for watching. Let's get behind the players now. It's going to be a tricky end of tricky end to the season. It'll be a tricky couple of weeks, is what I was trying to say. But I do believe we can get out of it. It is still in our hands. So join us next time on the Toffee Blues.